Welcome to Breaking the Silence of Design, a bi-monthly vodcast designed to discuss the issues of justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion in the built environment. My name is Karen Compton, principal of A3K Consulting, and your co-host.
And I'm Gabrielle Bullock, co-host, principal, and director of Global Diversity with Perkins & Will. And today our discussion takes us up north to San Francisco's Department of Public Works. Today we are excited to be joined by San Francisco Department of Public Works Project Manager, Jumoke Akin-Taylor. Jumoke began her career as a site inspector with Fairfax County government in Virginia in 1988. She served at the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, as well as with CBRE before joining the San Francisco Department of Public Works. She currently serves on the CMAA NorCal Board of Directors as the chair of the Owners Committee, and also serves as a juror on DBIA National Award Jury Committee. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And I'm very glad to be sharing this space with you. I'm actually honored to be here with you. And thank you for all that you've been doing and making it easier for people like me to speak up.
Well, we are anxious to hear your story and anxious to hear your journey. Yours is different than any other guests that we've had, in large part because you are not only the first Black woman as a public works manager for the city and county of San Francisco, but you are also an immigrant. And that has allowed you to experience and understand racism in a very different context than some of our previous guests. So can you give us a little bit of your journey and kind of that lens and perspective?
So I moved to this country probably at the age of about 16, going on 17, to attend college. And I did not have, or I wasn't aware of racism until one day, and I think it was lunch. I was with one of my colleagues and friend, and there was a very rude guy. He was really nasty.
Yeah.
And it's like, what's wrong with him? You know, I thought it was more of his problem than me. And so it was Debbie, and she explained to me that he was just being a racist, and it's like, okay, what
is that?
And she went on to explain. And I was in DC. I went to University of DC, was a historically Black college. So my experience there was different. We had some white classmates, but I had never really been exposed to racism or aware of it. And that was the journey. That just became more an awareness. That's what created the awareness for racism, about racism for me. And I think I was intrigued and started reading more about civil rights movement and all the things that had happened. And I started noticing things that I had previously ignored or that I wasn't conscious of as racism. Because growing up in Nigeria, I grew up in Nigeria, I had white aunties that were married to my uncles. I had biracial cousins. My teachers in elementary school and in high school were mostly white or other immigrants. So I didn't have that exposure to racism. And I think that changed me, you know, when I became more aware of the plight of Blacks in this country and what racism was about. I think it robbed me of my innocence.
Well, I think it was Angela Davis that said racism is a social construct, and that we've constructed it here extremely well, unfortunately. And we've all tried to navigate that space, I think, as design and construction professionals. But it is a construct, and what you're saying is that that construct doesn't exist from your perspective in Nigeria.
It did not, for me. No, it did not exist when I was growing up.
You made the observation that as a young professional, folks would use your accent to diminish your voice. But you had a mentor along the way who helped you through that or gave you some advice. Can you share what that was?
Yes, and I still find that to this day, you know, people trying to use my accent to kind of maybe silence me or diminish me in some way. And so as a young professional, as I started off, it was always, huh? What did you say? I can't understand what you're saying. And then I became so conscious, and then I'll repeat the words, very slowly. I'll say almost one at a time. And to the point where it was easier for me not to speak. Mm-hmm. It was easier for me.
And that was the intent, right?
That was the
Right.
intent.
Yeah.
But fortunately, I had a mentor, and because I was vibrant, because I was just driven, and I wanted so much. And I think over a period of time, he noticed that my shoulders would drop. And I just
Body
came
language
in.
says a lot.
Yeah. I'll come into the office with this dejected look. And he was like, he called me Jay. What's wrong? And so I went on to narrate some of the things that I had been going through. I would be in meetings, and they would just continue the meetings like I wasn't there. And I was the project manager, right?
So they were treating you as if you were invisible.
I wasn't there. I was invisible, right? And when I tried to kind of get into the conversation, it was like, huh? And they would just move on, right?
Like, who just spoke?
It was
Yeah.
like, uh-huh. I was like, okay. So, and I had learned to be silent, right? Because I don't understand what you're saying. So it was my accent. So I wasn't speaking properly. But Al told me, I do understand you very clearly. And he told me that, you know what? You're the PM. You run the show. And if they're not listening to you, you have the right to end the meeting. And I felt empowered, but obviously it didn't happen immediately, right? So I would go into the meetings and I'll try to speak up and then try to insert myself into the meeting that I was chairing, right? And
it's your meeting.
Wow.
it's my meeting,
Yeah.
right? And so eventually, I think one day I just summoned up the courage that, you know what, this is it. And I kind of heard Al saying, you have the right to, and I was like, this meeting is over. I think the shock kind of everyone looked at me, because I raised my voice actually to say, if I'm not going to be listened to, this meeting is over. They understood my accent at that time. So
How'd the next meeting go?
the next meeting everybody was like, okay, you want to run the meeting? Fine. We're not going to say anything. You run the meeting, right? So I had that resistance. You want to be boss? Be boss by yourself. But eventually, I think a couple of people kind of, felt, okay, let's not do this. And they started warming around. Not everyone. I wasn't able to win everyone.
Yeah.
But I think that helped me to go, this is who I am. And I'm going to speak slowly so that you can understand. And if I need to repeat myself, fine. But I'm not going to let you use my accent to silence me. And so that's how I continued.
So you found your voice, you used your voice, still using
Started
it.
finding my voice.
You started finding your voice. So tell us a
started-
little bit about how you now use your voice.
I think now being able to speak up when my kids started getting into the workforce. Because, as an immigrant, you think, okay, I'm privileged. This is just a right, so don't rock the boat. It's a lot worse for others. Be silent, be grateful. And so you take a lot.
I think we tend to do that collectively in this journey, and it's not good for us.
Yeah. But I think it changed with my kids. They'll come back. It's not as bad as I had it growing up. I mean, getting into the workforce, but I would hear some stories about, it's like, that's exactly what I was going through. And as parents, you become very defensive. And I was like, okay, no, I'm not going to, no, I have to speak up. And so I started speaking up. I started being more assertive. But then you have you're conscious about not being aggressive or angry, because that's what they tend to label you. So I'll take a deep breath, and if I had something to say, I would calm down and speak so slowly. Or I would write that email or write that note, read it over and over again, and make sure that I was sending the right message.
Before you hit send.
Yeah, before I hit send. And that became more. That helped me, because I realized that this was more of a mental game, because I was beginning to doubt myself. I was beginning to think, maybe there was something that I wasn't doing right. But eventually I knew that this was not my problem. It was someone else's, and I wasn't going to let that be my problem.
Right. Okay, now we're going to move into your work with the City and County of San Francisco's Public Works. Can you talk about whether or not and how they're seeking to be more inclusive on projects? And the second part of that is, what are the expectations that they may have of project teams?
I think the mayor of 2019 kind of, and the Board of Supervisors passed an ordinance to establish an Office of Racial Equity that mandated city departments to come up with a racial equity action plan. Because there was the issue, right? There were some issues coming up in the city about racism, employees that were not treated fairly or unfairly. And so the city took that action. And fortunately, I became one of the 11-member team for my department to develop this strategic action plan of how we address those challenges that that the city or the department is faced with. And public works is very diverse. We have representation of all colors. But we took a deep dive when we started that racial equity plan, right? So diversity is one thing, but equity and inclusion is another.
Exactly.
And so we started that journey of, hearing our colleagues and them expressing, reviewing the data of the demographics, the classification. And so that really was an eye-opener for us. And we presented that in a report. It's actually online. And came up with 177 pages
Oh boy.
of action plan, and comprehensive, because we had everybody's voice involved. Now, on the teams, like when we're interviewing solicitation documents, it expresses the city's interest in having diverse, equitable and inclusive teams. So everyone kind of knows that that's the requirement in the city. And the way we run the meetings is to make sure that everyone's voice is heard, right? Whether you're a contractor, a city employee, there's that platform that creates a respect and value in your contribution. So we set that stage. I think we do.
You said you had 177 pages of report, which means there's probably another 177 that got left on the cutting room floor somewhere.
Probably.
What was probably the most eye-opening thing? I'm just kind of curious. Was there anything that kind of stood out as like the most eye-opening thing that became actionable?
I think the classifications, right? Like where we had, I am the first and only Black project manager.
Wow.
Still
in public works. I think even in the city, we found that out by accident, right? 2018, during Black History Month, we're doing trailblazers.
Yeah.
So we called HR, who was the first.
Yeah.
And
And
it's
then they
like,
go, you.
Jumoke,
First
like,
and
are
only.
you sure? You guys need to check your records. And I was the first. And I'm still the only one there. And I'm hoping that I won't be
The last.
So I have a question about San Francisco's focus. So is it just internally the makeup of the organization and wanting to be more diverse and equitable, or has this also impacted who does work for the city?
I don't know that I have that answer, because the Office of Racial Equity probably is the one that has more of that answer. As my involvement was department-wide public works. But I think based on the legislation or the ordinance that was passed, the city is looking to ensure that there is equitable service across the city.
You had mentioned more about inclusion, not just about diversity. What steps can you speak to? I'm just curious as to how the city and county of San Francisco and Public Works have been able to promote more inclusiveness and more belonging in conversation or project teams.
I can speak for myself and the way, because so a few years ago we had core values, right, in the way that the city runs, I mean the department, how we address issues and how we run our teams. And it was respect, integrity, and inclusion. That was that was very important to us. So there was that consciousness, right, to just create an environment where people felt respected and valued. And so personally, I took those core values to heart. So I operated with that. And I think maybe as an impacted, I knew the difference. I knew why that was important. So it's one thing to enact policies, is another thing for people to actually implement it or follow it. So, yeah.
It's a journey.
It's a journey.
I notice you use a word that I really like. You refer to yourself as the impacted. And I like that can you tell me a little bit about why you chose to frame it that way? And the only reason I ask the question is because oftentimes Gabrielle and I will say, we're not asking to be victim here. We're asking to be acknowledged. And that word choice to me just kind of resonates. And I'm just curious. It's not something that I had planned to ask, but I'm really curious as to why you choose to frame it that way.
I think just like you, I'm not a victim. I don't want to be a victim. I want you to understand that your actions have impacted me negatively, economically, and psychologically. So, and I don't want to play the victim. So, because when I become the victim, I become powerless. But when I'm impacted, this is how you've impacted me, and this is what needs to change. And so that's why I chose that word. I don't know why or where it came from, but I am
Great choice.
impacted.
I love it.
I love it.
Yeah.
And I love the way you described it. You know, if I see myself as the victim, that means I'm powerless.
Yes.
And impacted means that I still have power and authority.
Yes.
I just need you to understand your role in it.
Yes.
And I deeply appreciate that nuance.
Thank you.
I think at this point, Jumoke, I think you had a question for us.
So my question is, I've listened to a lot of your podcasts, and I'm actually really blown away as to how much you've done. And this is a journey. And so how do you continue this? Because it does take a toll on you mentally, right? Because sometimes it's like you're hitting a brick wall. And you guys just keep it together.
Oh no, there's a lot that you don't see.
Okay. Well, the ones I've seen so far, you kept it together. And so how do you keep focused to know that this is a journey that you need to continue and not get discouraged?
Well, I'll start. What keeps me going is that this is my journey. This is my life, right? I chose to do something impactful with my seat at the table. On the personal side, yes, it's frustrating. It's sometimes you lose hope. And I call this one. We have a glass of wine, we regroup, we vent, and then we get back out there. I am encouraged by the responses, and so that fuels us to keep going. And there are many more conversations going on, so that's what keeps me going. But last year was tough. It was really tough. We really had to work hard to
Find the energy.
bring our whole selves, be optimistic, while being informative.
And I think for me, kind of taking that step back every once in a while, to look at what has happened, not just reflect on what hasn't happened, because this is truly a marathon. Just because someone else has only become aware of racism personally or within the profession doesn't mean it hasn't always existed. So I have to try really hard on a personal basis to look at, okay, what has been able to be accomplished within the time period, and where can I insert myself, or where can I use my own authority and power and voice to move the conversation forward, move other people forward. Because one thing is true, I won't see the end of the journey. That is for absolute sure. I won't get a chance to see how this concludes. I'll only know how I've been able to insert myself into it. And by really taking some time to step back every once in a while and be reflective, I think that's been huge. I think that's been huge. And you do something very similar, I believe, with Shades of Construction, is it?
Yeah.
How have you managed to kind of balance it? Because you're doing the same thing on the construction side.
Yeah. Honestly, there were times I wanted to just run away and said, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore. It's too hard. But I know that I have to, right? Because I'm standing on the shoulders of those that gave their lives, that I can't even begin to understand their journey and the sacrifice they made. And so this little thing that I can do to be discomforted a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, so that helps me to go, like you said, I have to do my part. I just, no matter how little it is, I have to do my part. And that's what Shades is, right? Just creating more of that awareness in the industry. In construction, I was invincible for many, many years.
Yeah.
I wasn't there. I had been in the industry for over 33 years, and I was at conferences. No one knew I was there. I didn't even know I was there because, you know, I never felt I was a part of the industry until just maybe a few years ago, 6, 7 years ago. You know, people kind of pulled me in and, you know, recognized that I had something valuable to contribute. And that was it. Otherwise, I was not even there. I didn't exist. And that's it for a lot of blacks in construction. It's a job. We just go in there. It's not a career. It's not a profession.
Yeah.
It's a job.
Right.
And so that had to change for me.
I had the exact opposite experience of you at conferences. You said you were invisible. I had the exact opposite thing happen. There's another friend of mine who is now a project manager over at USC, and we would go to the same conference, and people would start talking to me as if I were her, and then they would talk to her as if she was me. They assumed we were the same person, and that went on for years. And finally, we both politely said, "You do realize I'm not Allison, right?" "Oh no, I thought you were." And she would get the exact same thing. She would say, "You realize I'm not Karen, right?" And "Oh no." So that level of invisibility is both physical invisibility and then a lack of awareness that there are different people within the profession.
Please, there were 2 of you at the conference.
At least you got confused.
At
with
least I
somebody.
got confused with somebody, right? But ridiculous though it may be.
Yeah.
Right. Well, Jumoke, you have the last word. Anything you want to leave us with?
Oh, so many. But I think I go between quotes by Martin Luther King and Steve Jobs. See, I didn't know how to pronounce that.
That's quite a spin there, Steve Jobs. MLK.
And I think the one that kind of really, that I keep at the front of my mind is those who dare to dream that they can change the world are the ones that actually do. And the Martin Luther King is like, those who love peace must learn to organize as effectively as those who love war. So those two kind of, I keep that at the back of my mind. And then I know that I also, you know, I say forgive yourself and then heal so that you can, you know, do what you need to do to make the change.
Beautiful words.
Thank you so much for joining us. I can't believe that this has been the end of our time together with you, and I really, truly can't believe that it's been the end of our 2nd season.
This is the end of season 2. We've done 18 podcasts of Breaking the Silence of Design.
And it's been quite a journey.
Yes.
I think it kind of began out of a lot of passion and urgency, some fear, I think really kind of drove us in the beginning. You know, what are your thoughts?
Well, I was thinking about it this morning and thought back for the last year. We started this in July of last year. And it's
And
been
it was
challenging.
hot.
It was hot.
It was
It was
hot.
hot, and it was in the midst of the pandemic and the, you know, masks and everything. It was challenging.
Yeah.
It was challenging to balance this with our day-to-day jobs. It was a lot of work. But I will say that what drove us, the sense of urgency, really made it all possible. And that if I could leave our listeners, viewers with anything, is while it was hard, it made a difference, we think, and it's not impossible to, so I encourage anybody who wants to start a conversation, continue a conversation within your own space, your own world, to do that, because I think it's been, all the responses have been very positive, and you know, this journey is not over, but we don't have to be the only voices in this.
So I talked to somebody a week or two ago, and they said, we've used the vodcast as conversation starters in our office. We watch an episode and then we talk about it afterwards. And I never imagined in my wildest dreams that that was how people would choose to use the platform. We just really wanted to have difficult conversations, but that has been an amazing byproduct that somebody could use it in that way and have some kind of meaningful change.
And I couldn't think of a better partner to go down this journey with, bloopers and all.
Okay, well, we'll have to put that reel together. We'll have to put that reel together. First and foremost, I think for me, I want to thank you, genuinely. You have been my ride or die as a friend, as a colleague, but in this in particular, you have been a ride or die. And I want to thank our first guest, David Hart, for his vulnerability and his continued interest. I want to thank IBI Group for lending us their very first space, DLR Group for lending us this space, and all of the people who have not only viewed us, but supported us, all of our other sponsors, Co-Architects, SOM, all of the wonderful firms that supported us along the way in this, who have allowed us to call this space a safe space and allowed us to use this as our home for a minute while we have these conversations.
And I too want to thank you. We're in that same rowboat. Don't drop that oar. I didn't drop the oar.
No,
or
you
if
didn't.
I did, you had yours. So it was great being in the boat
Yeah,
with you.
yeah.
But we have to thank our production crew. Darren Cradoff. Did I say your name
You all
right?
don't get a chance to see them, but
Wait,
they
wait,
are
wait.
amazing people who've made this possible.
Darren Cradoff of DC Productions. You guys have been great. You taught us how to tape. We've had lots of bloopers, dangling jewelry in the mic. We have flubbed. And so we thank you for teaching us how to do this and allowing us the space to learn.
Yeah. So with that, I want to thank everyone for joining us again today. Thank you again to all of our component partners, our subscribers. You can always start your own conversations. Watch the ones that you've seen so far on LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube, and all of our social media platforms. Thank you very much. And
Thank you very much. And thank you.
Thank you.